All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name is Corey Ruttercup. I'm the CEO of the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce. And thanks for watching another one of our candidate interviews in advance of the 2025 federal election on April 28th. The Chamber's invited all the candidates from Langley's three ridings to participate in these video one-on-ones to share a bit about their perspective, what they're looking to do if they can represent us in Ottawa. And so you can hear about the candidates in your local riding. These videos will be aired unedited on our website at langleychamber.com and then shared through our communication channels in the lead up to final election day. Today, I'm joined by Mike de Jong, who's running in the riding of Abbotsford-South Langley. Mike, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us for this.
Corey, great to be here, and thanks to you and the Chamber for facilitating this important communication with people in the area.
Thanks for taking the time. Why don't we dive in? And did you want to share a little bit about introduce yourself, your background, kind of, and your vision for what's motivated you to run in this election this time?
Right. Well, many people, first of all, I should say it's the Chamber. I've been a proud member of the neighboring Chamber for over 35 years. I see the Chamber as a fundamentally important part of the makeup of our community, the voice of business, particularly small business. So it's one of the only organizations that I have remained a member of throughout my time since I had my law firm, my own business. I have maintained my membership, and again, thank you to the Chamber for being the voice of business and inviting me here. Look, I have been involved politically for many years. I have represented parts of Langley Township over the past 3 decades as the MLA in Abbotsford West and Abbotsford South, and that has been a great honor of mine. I had thought that retirement was in the cards, but when Member of Parliament Ed Fast announced his resignation, I was persuaded by the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre and others to throw my hat in the ring to seek the nomination for the Conservative Party, and spent the better part of a year with a great team of volunteers pursuing that. I was surprised, therefore, when a few days before that nomination vote, someone from Ottawa called to say, application denied. Thanks for your interest. You're not permitted to contest the nomination, despite having been unanimously recommended by the local Conservative Association. The folks in Ottawa decided to manipulate the nomination process in favor of a young man with very little experience, and whom arguably no one had really heard of. And today, someone who refuses to participate in the election campaign by coming to all candidates' meetings. All to say, thereafter, long-standing members of the Conservative Party and others came to me and said, this isn't right. Local people should be selecting our candidates, and we're not going to have someone imposed upon us. They persuaded me to run. So I like to say there are actually 2 Conservative candidates on the ballot. One with very little experience who doesn't want to talk to people, and another one, myself, who has served the area to the best of my ability, and that I know will bring a powerful, strong voice on behalf of Abbotsford-South Langley in Ottawa.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do the video and to make yourself available to voters to this platform, at least. Why don't we dive into some of the topics and things that are on top of mind for people in Abbotsford-South Langley here, and I probably don't need to tell you that I think there's probably a couple issues that are bubbled to the top. One is both Abbotsford and Langley are border communities and have a lot of exposure to what's going on south of the border. Do you have any thoughts on kind of how businesses and families should be reacting, and what you would advocate for as an independent voice in Ottawa to how we should be reacting to the tariff talk from Trump and the actions taken there? But beyond that, how we should be building a more resilient Canadian economy and making sure that we can be more competitive and trade with ourselves more and break down those barriers internally.
Well, you put your finger on the ultimate solution, and look, you're right. Abbotsford-South Langley, and I say this to everyone I speak to and the national media who are getting educated a little bit about our area, and I say these communities are on the front line economically and geographically to the attack Mr. Trump has launched. And when you consider our agri-food sector and what these tariffs, on again, off again tariffs would mean to them. When our small manufacturing sector, what these tariffs would mean here to them, and never mind the disrespect that Mr. Trump has shown to our country generally, having a strong voice with some experience. And the example I use, Corey, is this. A few years ago, when I was the forest minister in BC, we were embroiled in a trade dispute. It was an important trade dispute, softwood lumber. And we finally did negotiate the last softwood lumber agreement. And negotiating in the White House with people like Vice President Dick Cheney, you learned a lot about just how tough the Americans can be at the negotiating table. Now, I will say this, as tough as they were, I never doubted that they valued the overall relationship between Canada and the US. I'm not sure we can say the same thing today about the Trump White House. So that presents an even more interesting challenge for us. But clearly we need people at the table on the Canadian side and people involved who have some experience and can deal responsibly and thoughtfully with the challenge Mr. Trump represents.
And I'll move, taking from that tariff thought. I mean, and one of the impacts and the spin-offs of tariffs and is the increased cost of things as everything gets 25% tariff slapped on that. And for our members, and both in our internal data and from broader economic surveys, we know beyond the uncertainty with tariffs, the number one issue for businesses is the cost of doing business. And I'm sure as you're door knocking and talking to people, kind of the cost of living, inflation, that's certainly top of mind. Do you have any thoughts, or what would your perspective be if you were to be able to represent Abbotsford-South Langley in Ottawa? What would you be advocating for to how do we solve the problem of the rising cost of everything, and to make sure that families and businesses and individuals in this riding can make a go of it?
Well, first of all, you put your finger on part of the answer in your previous preamble. I am prepared to blame Donald Trump for a lot of things. His disrespectful commentary, his destabilization of not just our bilateral relationship, but the world generally. What I cannot blame Donald Trump for is the weakened state of the Canadian economy. That is something that is the result, in my view, of bad government policy, both federally and in the case of British Columbia, Victoria's government. So how do we deal with that? Well, you talked about the hurdles that we face just trading within Canada. But people forget in 2003, when I was part of a provincial government, we signed an agreement called the Trade Investment Labor Mobility Agreement with Alberta and later Saskatchewan that eliminated those interprovincial barriers and allowed for the free movement of people and goods. The agreements exist. We just got to sign on. So I listen to people now, provincial and federal politicians who seem to have discovered this and say, where were you 20 years ago when some of us were trying to take those steps and took those steps in the face of much criticism from opposition political opponents? So that's the first thing we can do. Look, we got to get government spending under control. Bullies prey on weakness. We are sinking into a sea of debt, and that makes us weaker. Responsible management of the people's tax dollars should be a hallmark of any government. When I was finance minister, we balanced the budget 5 years in a row. Was it easy? No. But we had the strongest economy. We had the strongest job creation numbers. We were the envy of virtually every jurisdiction in North America because of, and that doesn't mean we didn't have some issues, but they were issues associated with having a strong performing economy. That is not the situation today in Canada, and we need to get back to that.
A little bit from cost of living, because the biggest bill on most people's balance sheets, or when they're trying to make their bills at the end of the month, is the mortgage or the rent, and how it's no surprise housing and housing affordability is a challenge in Langley and in Abbotsford. And it's becoming a business issue. If people have less disposable income to spend at our small businesses, that's a problem. And if workers have to live further and further afield, then they're not available to take jobs locally in Langley and Abbotsford here. What do you think needs to be done to or can be done from the federal government's perspective or on the levers that they have to tackle housing affordability in growing communities like Abbotsford and Langley, which are amongst the fastest in the province?
Yeah, happily, I see a strong linkage between two issues, Corey. One being transportation. So I say this to people. If we were a community the size of Langley and Abbotsford, uh, outside of Toronto, the Mississaugas, the St. Catharines, we would have commuter rail. We would have a commuter rail transit option. We don't. We have been ignored. Now it's expensive, but one of the ways you can pay for that, at least help to pay for it, in extending a rail transit link, and I have seen and I am supportive of the revitalization of the BC Electric line and the work that a great local group are doing to promote that, is densified housing along the route, particularly around the stations. We got to be honest with people. For most young families, most young people, entry into the housing market today is not going to be a detached home. They're worth more than $1 million now. But what we can do is make sure that there is densified housing, townhouses, condos available so that young people and young families can get into the housing market at an affordable price. I can guarantee you this, Corey. If housing isn't available, it won't be affordable. And here's a chance to take the two needs. I mean, Highway 1 is an embarrassment. It's our national highway. You can't move on it. One of the last things I did as finance minister was approve an expansion. The provincial government that took over canceled that, and now we've got a lingering mess that is still 3 years away from being addressed. But if we create a rail transit option into the central and eastern Fraser Valley and use that as an opportunity to invite the private sector in to build more housing, and by the way, look at perhaps recreating something we used to have in BC called a BC Second. Now, maybe there's a role for the government to provide some assistance to young families in terms of the down payment, and register that as a second mortgage against the property as a way of facilitating people getting into the market. I mean, these are ideas that I think need to be pursued, but it begins with facilitating the approval of more housing along a transit route.
For that, and we're galloping towards our time here, so I'm going to pivot to one other topic that I know is important to a lot of people, and then I'll give you a minute to wrap up here. Completely different now onto the issue of public safety. We know in Langley for sure, and I'm sure the Chamber in Abbotsford will tell you the same thing, that property crime, street disorder, homelessness are challenges for the business community. They're challenges for people who live in these communities as well. And that this is an area where there is definitely overlap into federal jurisdiction. What do you think needs to be done at the federal level? What will you advocate for around how do we address the issue of of repeat offenders, of the revolving door of enforcement, and then also the broader issues of homelessness and addiction, which seem to be driving these challenges, which we can't quite seem to get our hands around?
All right. Well, let me start with the first issue. First of all, I used to be a prosecutor. Not everyone knows that. And then I went on to be Attorney General. And I'm going to tell you this. People have lost respect for the law. People commit offenses 20, 30, 40 times, and there are no consequences. And when there are no consequences, people no longer care. That needs to change. And that begins with amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada. Criminal law is presided over by the Parliament of Canada, and the Liberal government under Mr. Trudeau made specific changes that have made the situation worse, not better. And that needs to be recognized, and that needs to be addressed. So I would begin there. I think the time for mandatory minimum sentencing sadly has arrived, because we need to send a signal to those who are resolved to commit crimes over and over and over again that their behavior will not be tolerated and they will pay a price. And that price is their freedom. So that's the first thing. The experiment around drugs has failed. And like you say, we can walk around downtown Langley, downtown Abbotsford, and see the results of this misguided policy. It was done, and look, I'm going to say this: I don't question the motives by those who advocated it. They felt it was the way to go to save people's lives. Well, I'm going to tell you, from what I have seen, it has failed society, but maybe more importantly, it has failed the very people it was intended to help. Condemning people to a life of misery by providing them with a steady stream of free and what are called safe drugs is not the answer. There is no such thing as safe cocaine. There is no such thing as safe heroin and all of these other drugs. What I believe Canadians are prepared to do, because I think Canadians are a compassionate people, is devote significant resources to providing treatment facilities when it's needed, not 6 months later. And I've seen that far too often. People who finally get to the end of the rope, realize they need help, and then are told, yeah, well, we can help you in 6 months. Well, that doesn't work. And what we see on the streets here is unacceptable. And it's time for governments to realize the experiment has failed, and it's time to take a different approach.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike, for your time on answering those questions. Do you want to take we'll wrap up here. Do you want to take a moment to say any final notes to anyone watching here from Abbotsford-South Langley on as we head towards the last week and a half or so of the campaign?
Well, first of all, thanks for watching, because if you're watching, it's because you care. And what I have detected, especially in the unique circumstance surrounding the election in Abbotsford-South Langley, is people are very frustrated and in some cases giving up on democracy. And I'm here to tell people, don't give up on democracy. Yes, what happened here in terms of the Conservative nomination wasn't right, but we can fix that. We can deal with that and stay involved and vote. And look, this is the part of the program where I'm supposed to look into the camera, Corey, and say, please vote for me. Okay, I'm a politician. Yes, I would like people to support me. But what's more important even than that is that people get engaged and vote. And fewer and fewer and fewer of us are doing that. And that is troubling, because democracy is a participation sport for the people operating small businesses, the members of the chamber. They understand the role government plays in either complicating the lives of small businesses or hopefully making it better. And that's what's at stake here. So my plea to people is to get involved, get engaged. And when you do so, yes, I hope you'll examine, in my case, a record of over 30 years of public service. I think I can bring a powerful voice on behalf of business and families to Ottawa. And that is certainly what we need and what people are entitled to expect.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Mike, for taking the time. Good message there. Democracy doesn't work without people voting, and doesn't work without people's names on the ballot. So thanks for stepping forward. And I appreciate you again joining us for this video. Best of luck on the campaign there.
Thanks, Corey.